Good to see all of you. This is such an honor to introduce a legend in the field of marketing and marketing science, Professor Srinivasan. Uh, Professor Srinivasan's brief bio, because it's hard to summarize a lifetime of work. So, in like a conjoint, I have to also prioritize here. So just to kind of hit a few things, Professor Srinivasan started his career as an engineer in training from IIT Madras. And he's going to talk about how he got to each of those points in his career. And then he worked in India at Larsen and Toubro, and then that got him interested in industrial engineering and operations, which brought him to the US, to actually Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University, where he pursued a master's and a PhD. And and some chance meetings, and I don't want to give the storyline. I'm just building up a trailer here. That led him to work on his monumental contribution, which is conjoint analysis. And he is taught at Rochester, and then I attended his talk about a month back at the IIT group in Houston, and from what I know, he finished his PhD in very early part of 70s. By 76, he came to Stanford and became a full professor. I don't know if that is not the accomplishment we need to talk about. I don't know what else summarizes his monumental contributions. And after that, he has made such a lifetime contributions that even I was telling him that his we will have his students and his grand students and great grand students. They're all continuing to make such a monumental contribution to the field of marketing. In fact, one of his grand students got the Parlin Award, which is such a huge award in the field of marketing. So if that is not a contribution, I don't know how else I can encapsulate his word in a few words. So he started his life with some random events, but then he started getting into the field of choice modeling, which is what we call as conjoint analysis. So without much ado, the floor is yours, Professor Srinivasan. Thank you so much.
One additional comment here, Dr. Srinivasan, that you left Pittsburgh in 1976 to go to Stanford, and I entered Pittsburgh on 1976 fall, and okay. I did PhD in Pittsburgh I was there 76 to 80 in
wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Kulkarni, and also thank you, Vivek Natarajan. I really appreciate this opportunity to get together with Indian Americans. And Vivek, if my volume is not right or something, please let me know. Is it okay now?
I think so. Oh. I'm hearing you fine, sir.
Okay, very good. I will start. I graduated from the Indian Institute of Technology in Madras in 1966. I am the third batch of Indian IIT Madras. I was lucky enough to be the gold medalist in that year. And after graduating from IIT Madras, I wanted to do went into the line of work at Larsen and Toubro in Bombay. I was in production planning and control. And in the process of sort of doing some work there, I realized my education is not adequate to do a good enough job there. So I requested L&T, Larsen and Toubro, to give me a 2-year leave of absence without pay from L&T, and they said they would be glad to give that to me. And when I come back, they will put me in a higher position. So my whole interest was to come to the US, do an MBA, and then return to Larsen and Toubro. That was absolutely clear to me. I never knew much about what a PhD program is or what an academic career is. So that is the start of coming to the United States. This was back in 1968, I came to the US. Now, after coming to the US, I joined the MBA program at Carnegie Mellon. And what is really interesting is that at the end of the very first semester, there was a course in operations research. And in the operations research course, in the final exam, there was a numerical problem. And 2 sets of answers were obtained by students. That is, some students, including me, got one answer, and another set of students got a different answer. And if I tell you what the context of that problem is, which I won't go into detail now, you will understand quickly that there cannot be 2 answers to this question. There can be only one answer. So I was curious as to why we are getting 2 different answers. Even though checking and double checking, we found that each one is correct. And so I figured out eventually as to why it was actually happening, and also developed a method to find the only correct solution to this problem. And I went to Professor Gerald Thompson, who was my professor in that course, and told him, this is what's happening in this problem. This is why we are getting two different answers. And here is a method to get always the only correct answer. And he said, you should not be in the MBA program. I should switch you into the PhD program. And so that is how I ended up in the PhD program. I had, as I told you, I did not have any idea what a PhD program actually is. And it is one of the situations where there was a hidden talent in me in terms of doing research, and I didn't even know what that was. And they switched me into the doctoral program. So after the first semester at doing an MBA at Carnegie Mellon, I got switched into the PhD program. And this very problem, and they related to that. So my doctoral dissertation was called a parametric programming of transportation problem. And so this problem actually gave me the topic for my dissertation directly quickly, and sort of developed it, wrote a number of research papers on it, and so on. So this is the first part. So I think I'm going to do operations research. It turns out a second random event happened to me when I was at Carnegie Mellon, and this was I was staying in a graduate dormitory, and my roommate was a gentleman by name Alan Shocker. He is no more, but Alan Shocker was interested in marketing, whereas I am in operations research. So one day he tells me, hey, you know what? I have a problem in marketing, and I don't know quite how to solve it, but you are the operations researcher, so you should be able to solve it. So why not we sort of work on this together and come up with, maybe we can do some publication jointly. And so we started working on that thing. This is on the side. This is not my dissertation. It is not his dissertation, but we are working on the side. And it turns out, this is what I'm going to talk about in some detail a little bit later. But it turned out to be the most important research that either of us did when we were at Carnegie Mellon. So my dissertation was definitely important, and there are several publications from it and so on. But this research that we jointly did, Alan Shocker and I did, turned out to be the most important thing in this. So when I graduated from Carnegie Mellon, I joined in '68, as I told you. By 1971 May, I already had finished both my master's and PhD in about 2 years and 9 months, and joined the University of Rochester. And I was not really sure what I should do next, because I have my work experience in production management, I have my dissertation in operations research, and I have this new interest in marketing. And I had a job offer both from Kellogg, that is Northwestern University, as well as the University of Rochester. And one of the good things about the University of Rochester was that they told me, hey, you know what? I understand you're interested in these 3 areas. Why don't you teach a course in each one of these areas? And then over time, you will figure out what it is you're really interested in and maybe concentrate in that area. And that's basically what happened. I found more and more, my interest was more in this marketing research area. And in 1974, I joined Stanford. And in 1976, I was given both tenure as well as a full professorship. So I have been very, very lucky. So from '68, I came to this country thinking that I'm going to do an MBA and return to Larson and Toubro. And in 1976, I'm a full professor at Stanford University. I have been super lucky. And I will say the following. There is a famous saying by a Greek philosopher, which says, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. When preparation meets opportunity. I was well prepared for these opportunities that came my way. I think that is partly because of the IIT training in mathematical modeling and mathematics more generally, and then a curious mind. And as I told you earlier, I had this hidden ability to do research, and I didn't know that actually until I came to Carnegie Mellon. I've been a professor. Became emeritus in 2010, and for the past 15 years, I have been teaching in India. So I taught at the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad, as well as another school in Chennai called Great Lakes Institute of Management. The Great Lakes Institute of Management was started by my older brother. Some of you may know him. His name is Professor Bala Balachandran from Northwestern University. Our last names are different, and some of you who are Tamil oriented, you will know why our last names are different, but he's really my older brother. And he is the one who started the Great Lakes Institute of Management. So I've just turned 80 years old, and I thought that this is sufficient amount of teaching. So I now give occasional lectures here and there, continue to do a little bit of research. So with that as kind of a background and the random events which got me into marketing, let me talk about what it is my work, probably the most important bulk of my work has been. This is an area known, I am now sharing this presentation that is in front of you, an area known as conjoint analysis, and I will explain what that means in just a few minutes. So the whole idea is that we like to understand customer preferences. We like to understand the customer. And why? Because for product decisions as well as pricing decisions. And this methodology is applicable to both products and services, whether it is business to consumer, B2C, or business to business, B2B, for profit and not for profit. And currently, my estimation is that 30 to 40,000 commercial applications of conjoint analysis is taking place all over the world per every year. So this method has become very popular. It is solving real problems with real management, and I will share with you some idea of what this method is about. And so I'm going to give you 3 examples. The first one is when you have an innovation, and how do you quote unquote productize that innovation? How do you monetize that innovation is what I'm going to start with. Secondly, how much is the market willing to pay if I can put a new feature on a product? How much is the market willing to pay for it? And this comes up in the context of a patent infringement case for which I was an expert witness, and I'll talk about that. And then finally, an interesting problem many of us as faculty members know that our students will face when they graduate. What if they receive multiple job offers, which job offer would they actually take? Can I predict which job offer they would take? And that would be my third example that I would give. So the first example is the so-called productizing an innovation and monetizing an innovation. Let me start giving you a little background. So if you become sick and you go to your doctor's office, in some of those cases, the doctor is going to order a blood test. And if you are in a hospital or a clinic, then you just go to the clinic, the lab in the clinic, and you give your blood test. And so in a day or two, the results go to the doctor, and the doctor prescribes a medicine. Now think about the following. Suppose this is a solo doctor. This happens in India much more often. Solo doctor practicing, or it may be a very small group practice, maybe like 3 or 4 doctors, for example. In that case, it doesn't make sense to have a lab for doing this testing in that premises because the cost of it doesn't justify it. So what happens in that case is that you send a patient to an outside lab. The person goes and gives a blood test there, and then the results get communicated to the doctor, and the doctor then prescribes the medicine. There is quite a bit of time wasted in the process. So here is the interesting idea. The idea came by talking to the solo doctors and small practices for this medical company. Hey, what about, suppose we can come up with a blood serum analyzer. This is the idea of a machine, let's say the size of a refrigerator or something like that, that I can put in the premises of the doctor's office itself. So it may not be in the office, but right next to it in the back room, maybe. And then the registered nurse can draw the blood from the patient and do the test there itself. And then I get quickly the result, and I can prescribe the medicine. The patient is better off because obviously I'm able to prescribe very quickly. And so this is actually a good thing. Now, of course, you can't do all the things that you can do in a big lab in a hospital, but some simple tests at least you can do. So that's the basic idea. So let me just, so these are solo doctors or a small group practice, blood tests for, and this is the customer insight, a blood serum analyzer in the same premises rather than sending the patient to the lab and the delay that happens in the process. The question is how to productize and monetize on this insight, and I'll define what I mean by productizing in just a minute. So think about it this way. So you have a group of engineers in this medical equipment company. They know the general technology of how to build this machine, but there are lots of options. That is, you can do a very simple machine which will do only some of the basic tests, or you can do a much more elaborate machine which can do a lot more things, but then that will be a lot more costly to build. It'll take greater time to build, and it is going to cost a lot more to the doctor for leasing that equipment. So there are lots of trade-offs in terms of, should I come up with this product specifications or that product specification? So initially think of it for a moment that you are going to come up with a single product or maybe a product line of 2 products. So what should those products be? What should be the specifications of those products? so that the engineers can actually go through and develop that product. So this is what I mean by productizing and innovation. And let me give an example of this here. The example has been altered a little bit to protect confidentiality of the company. So this is what we call an attribute. One of the attributes of this product, namely this blood serum analyzer, is how many different tests can you do on this machine? Is it a very simple machine which can do only 5 tests, or a very advanced machine that can do 15 different tests? The 15 different tests include the 5 tests plus 10 more, or something in between, which is like 10 tests, for example. So these are parameters. So basically, this is the specification we have to tell the engineers that, I want you to come up with a product which can test these 10 things, for example, or 8 things, for example. Secondly, depending on the technology that you use, we have to train the nurse, the registered nurse, in order to use this equipment. That may take just a very simple one. If it is a simple one, it may take only 1 day, whereas if it is very complicated, it is going to take 3 days. So in between, it may be 2 days, for example. And now I am getting to the monetizing part of the innovation. How should we charge? What price should we charge to the doctor? Well, the equipment itself can be very expensive. So what is most likely to happen is that we are going to lease this equipment to the doctor. So there will be a per annual cost. So let's say the annual cost, the financing cost that the doctor or the small group has to pay is either $5,000 if it is a simple machine, or something more complicated machine which can develop a lot more of the tests. It is $15,000 per year. As well as there can be a cost per test. Every time you do a test, you need to pay $3 for it or $10 for it. So the reason why this monetizing in this case is done in terms of these 2 steps, namely the annual cost as well as the cost per test. This is a way of, some of you who are more economists will appreciate this. This is a way of price discriminating the market. So in other words, a small doctor will not want to pay very much per year, but may be willing to pay more for cost per test because the cost is going to be passed on to the patient anyway. Whereas on the other hand, if it is a large group practice, they may be willing to undertake. It's even more important for them to get the 15 tests as opposed to only the 5 tests, for example. So there are actually more attributes, but for simplicity, let me just stay with these 4 attributes. So my terminology now, there are 4 attributes in this example: the number of tests, number of different tests that the machine can do, how long does it take the doctor, the patient, the registered nurse to train on the machine, how much is the per year cost, and how much is the cost per test. And each of these attributes, 4 attributes, have levels. There are 3 levels of each of these attributes. Okay, in this example, the number of levels doesn't have to be equal. And a product is a combination of these attributes. So if you give me a machine, I'll know how many tests it can do, how long does it take for the nurse to train, and how much is the per year cost, and how much is the cost per test. So a product is nothing but a combination, and this is where the name conjoint analysis comes from. By the way, the name conjoint analysis was coined by me and the late Professor Paul Green of the University of Pennsylvania. This is back in a research paper back in 1978. We introduced this terminology called conjoint analysis, and as I say that this is now applied all over the place, and some 30 to 40,000 commercial applications taking place each year. Now, so if we take a particular combination of each of these 4 attribute levels, so for example, if we take 10 tests and it takes 3 days to train the nurse and it per year cost is $10,000 and $10 per test. This is a product. A product is nothing but a combination of attributes. This is the conceptualization in conjoint. In this example, actually, there are 81 possible combinations one can think of, because the first attribute can be any of 3 levels. The second attribute can be any of 3 levels. So 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 in the third attribute, times 3 in the fourth attribute. There are 81 possible combinations. Actually, there is a lot more combinations, because number of tests can be 8 or 12, and you can simply interpolate the results between 10 and 15 to get the result for 12, for example. So the number of possible combinations is actually a huge number, infinite almost. More generally, even though in my example I have used quantitative attributes, attributes can be subjective. So for example, brand name could be one of the attributes. The color of a product, some other product, could be also one of the attributes. And the number of levels don't have to be all equal. In my example, all the attributes have 3 levels, but some attribute can have 2 levels, another attribute can have 4 levels, and that is all perfectly okay. And we can interpolate, as I said, if the equipment costs $8,000, I will interpolate between 5 and 10 to get what that would be. Okay. So at this point, what we have done is that we have learned from the engineers what's the range of possible products that they can come up with, and what is its implication in terms of things that matter to customers, in this case, doctors or managers of these small groups, for example. And so what we are going to do next is that we are going to come up with a large sample of doctors, or you can also say, as I say, the managers of these facilities. And this is a representative sample. In this example, it may have been about 150 doctors, if I'm not mistaken. That's my recollection serves right. And we are going to do a survey with them. And the example of the survey I will explain to you in just a few minutes. And before you start the survey, of course, you need to explain to the doctor what the concept is. So this is usually done in the form of a video presentation. So maybe it is like a 10-minute presentation with a mocked up machine. The machine actually cannot do anything, but the doctor doesn't quite know that. But you see the machine in front of you, and then this machine can do the test. So it shows the nurse drawing the blood from the patient, putting it into the machine, and the machine spits out a result in terms of what germ or virus that this person is carrying, and the doctor prescribes a medicine. And the doctors are told after this video presentation that the equipment actually can be, there are lots of different possible equipment that may come on the market, and the number of tests that it can do can be either 5, 10, or 15, and like that we explain each of the attributes and each of the levels of each of those attributes, and allow them to ask questions. So that is how the initial setup before the interview is done. So before the survey is actually taken, we make a presentation about what the product category is, what the attributes are, what the levels are. Okay. Having done that, we are going to ask questions to the doctor in the following way. In their computer screen, it looks something like this. If there are 2 blood serum analyzers, there is one which can do only 10 tests. It takes 2 days to train your nurse. It costs $10,000 a year for you, and it costs only $5 a test. Would you rather buy this machine or this other machine, which takes 15 different tests it can do? It takes over 3 days to train your nurse. It's going to cost you more, $15,000 a year, and it's $10 per test. So on the other hand, you can do a lot more tests. So there is a trade-off between these 2 things, as you can see in this example. Either you can have the simpler machine, which is cost the doctor less, or you can have the more complicated machine. And by the way, before I proceed, I forgot to mention one thing. After we make this video presentation to the doctor, we also ask a question. We take sort of the best possible combination. That is, let's say, 15 tests. It costs only $10,000 a year. In 1 day, you can train the nurse, and it costs only $5 per test. Suppose that product were actually available. How interested would you be in buying this product? And it will be on a lease arrangement, as I told you earlier. So the answer is definitely. I'm definitely interested. Possibly probably interested. Might or might not. Probably not. definitely not. So there are 5 categories, starting from definitely interested to not at all interested. And what we have learned in market research is that people who answer the first 2 categories, definitely interested or probably interested, which is where you are going to get most of your market from. The people who say might or might not, possibly not, or definitely not, you don't have to waste your time with them. So you just keep track of how many people answered that way and excuse them. The remaining people who said they are definitely interested or probably interested, they are the ones who are getting the survey. Okay, keep that in mind. So one option also in each of these screens is that if these are the only 2 options present, I will not buy either of them. So that also you can say, okay? And a number of different choice sets like this are shown to the same doctor. Now, how we come up with a particular ones is an experimental design idea from statistics. And so I will not go into that in detail here. Some of you who are statisticians will appreciate that. And I am not going to go into the detail of this. Having done this, we can find out for each of these. Remember, in my example, I had 4 attributes and each of them had 3 levels. So there are 12 levels, so to speak, 12 attribute level combinations, in other words. For each of them, we are going to estimate a utility. What is the value of 10 tests? What is the value of negative value, you might think about? What is the negative value of $15,000 annual cost? What is the value of the patient, the nurse being trained in 1 day, et cetera, et cetera. We will get the utilities of each one of these things. So in this case, there will be 12 utilities corresponding to each of those 12 attribute level combinations. And the total utility here is a model. This is the mathematical model of conjoint analysis. The total utility for a product, in this case, let us say an example. This is the first example I had. 10 tests, 2 days, $10,000 a year, 5 is nothing but the sum of those utilities. We don't assume linearity, by the way. We don't assume linearity. That is the utility going from 10,000 to 15,000 to 5,000 to 10,000. It could be non-linear. But we do assume that the total utility is additive. That is, it is separable, so to speak. So that assumption is made. And there have been a number of tests in conjoint analysis which show that including interactions in these models does not in fact increase the predictability significantly. So this is why the additive utility model is the one that is commonly used. Now we assume the assumption, the other model, is the customer is going to choose the product with the highest total utility to the person. That is obviously taking into account both the benefits and the costs of buying this product. And different customers have different utilities, that's different choices. And so what we do next is to put this all in a simulator. This is basically a computer program where I have this 150 doctors' data, and I have the utility functions of each one of these doctors. That goes into the computer. And I can now query the computer like this. Suppose I have 2 products actually in the market. One like this one with this combination and the other one with this combination. How many of people are likely to choose the first one? How many people are likely to choose the second one? How many people will not buy either of those, will not choose either of those? So that kind of answer you can get from the simulator. And then you can say, well, suppose I decrease my price, what will happen? Suppose I improve the product in this way, what will happen? All these kinds of questions can be answered in the conjoint choice simulator, and that can be used together with any information you have in terms of how much is the investment you have to make in order to make this equipment, in terms of coming up with productizing, as I call it. That is what specifications we can put. And the word optimal I put in quote because the optimal is not only from a customer point of view, but also from lots of other considerations. So it's really more of a what-if analysis as opposed to an optimization problem. The optimization problem comes here. I mentioned in my Carnegie Mellon example where I met with my roommate and we were trying to solve a problem. It's basically the following. So if I have this product, which I have here, 10 tests, 2 days, $10 a year, $5 per test, and another product which is like $15 test, et cetera, and the customer says, I will choose this one, that implies a mathematical inequality between this sum and another sum. And so basically the method that we developed called LinMap, linear programming techniques for multidimensional analysis of preferences, is taking these inequalities that come from customer data and using linear programming to find the solution or the utilities which is most consistent with the paired comparison data that come from the consumer. So that's basically what we did in that research that Alan Shocker and I did at Carnegie. And now there are lots of different methods for doing conjoint analysis, so I will not go into this. So this is an example, first example of productizing and monetizing an innovation. In the interest of time, I think what I'm going to do is to, let me mention quickly, this kind of methodology is also used in patent infringement cases. This example, in your smartphone, you get notifications, right? And it turns out there was an old technology of how to send these notifications to you on your smartphone. And there is a company called Simple Air. I will take all the questions as soon as I finish my presentation. So we have reserved like 20 minutes approximately per question. How much is the market willing to pay? Sorry. So here the question, this company called Simple Air had a couple of patents in terms of how to send these notifications efficiently. And if you send this efficiently, the main advantage of it is that the battery, your battery of your smartphone will last longer. Now, it turns out the Google Android operating system uses this technology, but it was not paying any licensing fees to Simple Air. So Simple Air sued, first of all, asked Google to pay licensing fees, and Google said no, because they said we independently developed this. And Simple Air said, but we have these patents. And so Simple Air said, okay, we are not paying, we are going to take you to the court. And in these court cases, there are two stages to this court case. First one is, was the patent in fact infringed or not? Yes or no? And the jury is going to decide that. And second part of the patent case is, if in fact the patents were infringed, what is the damage that Google has to pay to Simple Air? Okay. So as I said, the implication of this new technology is longer phone battery life. How much is the market willing to pay for this improved battery life? That was the question. Now remember, when you buy a smartphone, there are lots of things in the smartphone. There is a camera. You are able to speak to somebody. You're able to get all sorts of notifications. You can look up the stock market, all sorts of things. The question here is, if I can improve the battery life by such and such, what is the value to the customer and what is the market willing to pay for it? So we want to get at just one aspect of it. And this is where conjoint analysis comes in. And in this example, there are lots of attributes like brand name and camera and all of that stuff, memory. But the market willingness to pay can be computed by comparing the utility of battery life and the utility of price. So if you put the two things together, you can actually figure out what is the market willing to pay for it. There is a research paper I have on this one. I won't go into this in detail. So I was one of the expert witnesses in this case, and by doing this conjoint research with a large sample of in the US of customers, cell phone customers, we found out that they are willing to pay $12 more per phone for this improved battery life. And then it's an economics expert sort of gets into the picture now and says, how many Android platforms were sold during the time of infringement in the US, and then says what the damage is. And so I was an expert witness, that gentleman was an expert witness, and of course the Google had its own expert witnesses, and the jury decided to award $85 million to Simple Air based on this technology, based on this case. So this is used quite often in the courtroom now for infringement cases too. The last example I'll finish in a couple of minutes, is in the context of MBA job choice prediction. As you know, I'm a professor at the Stanford Business School. We have a 2-year MBA program. And usually in the beginning of the second year is when students start getting presentations from companies in terms of, jobs that they have, etc. And so we did a little qualitative market research with our students to ask them, hey, at the end of finishing your MBA, you're going to take a job. What's important to you? And through this qualitative market research, we came up with 8 attributes. If I take this job, where is it going to be located? Is it in the East Coast, Midwest, South, etc., international? If I take this job, how many days do I have to be away from home? What's a total annual compensation that I get? Is the job in finance or marketing or general management, etc.? What's the growth rate of the company, etc.? So like 12 attributes like that. And we collected this data from the MBAs in the fall of the year. So let's say in September or October of a year. And then we went back to them in the subsequent June and asked them, what are the offers that, so based on the data we collected in October, the previous October, we estimated their utility functions and kept it somewhere. And then we went back to them 6 months later and asked them what job offers that you actually received. And tell me each of these job offers, where is it located? How much travel do you have to make, et cetera, all the same 8 attributes. And which job did you actually accept? And then now we can use the utility functions we estimated past 6 months earlier and to forecast or predict which job this MBA is actually going to take. And our success rate is approximately 70%. So with those 3 examples, I will stop my presentation. We have approximately 20 minutes and I will take questions. And I guess before you ask the question, please be sure to unmute your phone and introduce yourself and then please ask the question.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. That was a very good presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the floor is open for questions. If you have a question, unmute yourself and ask a question.
Professor Amar.
Hi. I will look at the first examples you gave us.
Yeah.
And the first attribute was how many tests the analyzer can do.
Right.
And we had 5, 10, 15.
Right.
And 5 was the lowest. And
Yeah.
obviously that machine had cost per year of only 5,000 and training only 1 day needed. And the cost of the test was $3. I didn't see it in the comparison.
Yeah, so I can understand where the question is coming from. So see, at this point, the product is not actually out in the market, okay? Just to keep that in mind. So only we are trying to ask ourselves, suppose I have 2 options. Let's think of it this way, maybe for example, suppose I have the option of, I don't know also exactly how much it is going to cost because I have to spend all this money on R&D to actually develop the product. And then only I will be able to figure out how much I am going to charge. So at this point, at the earlier point, having had the innovation and the process of developing the product, I have some options. That is, it can be only 5 tests. It may cost quite lower amount that I will charge or higher. But the question you notice that I asked subsequently is a question like this one, that here is a product which is going to be many more tests and it costs a lot more. And will you buy that? Will you choose that option or will you choose this option? So there is a trade-off between these 2 things, right? Do you follow me?
Right.
So you don't necessarily, some people are going to choose this option and some people are going to choose this option. And then like this, lots of different choices are given. And we also tell them, look, we don't know exactly what the prices of these products are going to be later on. Sometimes there may be a special sale. So even a product which has got a greater number of tests may not cost all that much. So we sort of suspend judgment, so to speak, so that they can answer these kind of questions. And from these questions is how we are going to estimate the utility functions.
Then why would we not make an attribute of R&D cost?
R&D cost
Because
is not a
that's
cost.
important.
Okay, it's not an attribute for the patient, for the doctor rather.
No, but
Follow
for
me.
decision whether to offer a productization we are taking, and in productization we may have to take R&D cost.
Yeah. So there is a sound that is coming from
Actually, yeah.
the
Could you please unmute HP's phone, please?
Sorry.
HP's phone. Can you unmute? Yeah, thank you.
Please unmute that.
Okay.
And
So,
we'll help you.
Mr. Amar, so we have to keep these 2 parts separately. One, what is the doctor going to see, and what the company is going, what the equipment manufacturing company is going to look at. The doctor doesn't particularly care about how much you spent on the equipment to develop that equipment. What is the R&D expenditure? So as far as the doctor is concerned, it is these issues that matter. Okay.
Mhm.
So this is only to provide, if I came up with a product like this, what will be the market reception? But then you are completely correct. In terms of making the final judgment, in terms of am I going to come up with this product or that product, I need to look at what the total implications for my company are going to be. That is how much R&D is involved, how long will it take to actually come to the market with, and what are the possible comparative implications and all of those kind of things. So that's why I said at the end, this is not, so this gives you only one side of the picture, namely how the market acceptance will be. But then you have to take into account your own issues with respect to how much R&D money I have to spend, etc., and then make a decision. This will be better from the market point of view, but this is going to cost me a lot more. Am I willing to do that investment in order to do this thing, or it may delay my coming up with a product? So that overall decision is a combination of both these input. So I'm not getting into that part of it.
Right. And you said some responded they would take neither. They don't want any.
Yeah.
And if they don't want any, then did they want the lower cost or higher cost, or what were they asking for?
So what they are basically saying is that this person is saying, if it is much, much cheaper, like only $2,000 per year, I might be willing to buy it. But given these two only options, this is $10,000, another one is $15,000. I will not choose either of these.
Okay.
So that is what such customers are going to check the third category.
Thanks.
Okay. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yes,
Yes, go
Professor
ahead.
Vinod.
I have a question on the same chart.
Yeah.
Now you're assuming that a doctor can charge same amount for every test, but some tests are more complicated than others. And some diseases are more complicated than others.
Yes.
So per test price of $10 or $5 may not be realistic, because you may want to charge more for some tests which are complicated and less for trivial tests.
Yeah, excellent comment. So let me think of it this way. The $5 test per test or $10 per test is what the equipment manufacturing company is going to charge the doctor. How much the doctor is going to charge the customer is a different issue. So one of the questions the doctor will be thinking in the back of their mind is that if I have this 15 possible tests, hey, look, this is actually better, because that will give me the opportunity to charge much more per test for such tests. So that's one of the reasons why they like the 15 tests as opposed to the 10 tests, for example. So there are lots of elements in play. So the doctor, when they provide this number, the $5 per test is what the equipment manufacturing company is going to charge the doctor, independent of which test they do. They want to make it simple, but it could be more complicated, like what you said also. It can be done like that. But I think in the way, at least they approached it at this time is to just say a blanket this thing. So this is the money that the doctor will pay the company, but what the doctor will charge the customer is a different story. That is, of course, based on what the current market conditions are. What does a lab normally charge? You might want to actually charge a little bit less or more, so that the patient is told, look, actually, it is even better here. It doesn't cost you anything more, and I can get you find out your illness much more quickly. So that's another side to this picture.
Now I have another quick question.
Okay.
The methodology that you use is linear programming.
Correct.
Can I know a little more about?
Right. So what linear programming is like this.
I know linear programming, but how you use it in this?
Oh, how I use it. Okay, sorry. Thank you for your comment. So let me take this example. So this is one combination, and let us say, just for example, a particular customer, in this case a doctor, chose this product compared to this. Chose product A1 compared to product B1, just as an example. Okay. Now, what does that mean? The first product A is what this product was, 10 tests, 2 days, etc. So this is the total utility for that combination, the product on the left. Similarly, there is a combination value for the product on the right. It will be U of 15 tests, U of whatever it was, whatever the example was. Do you follow me?
Yes.
So this is the total utility for product A, and likewise, the total utility for product B will be utility of 15 tests plus utility for 3 days, utility of $15 a year plus utility of $10 plus test. So when the doctor tells me that he prefers A to B, that means this combination, this equation, this sum should be greater than the sum corresponding to the second product. So
Okay.
that's the mathematical inequality, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now I have gotten actually the data we get. There are lots of such paired comparisons for a single doctor. Okay. Now, so I have these various inequalities. I want to come up with values for each of these utilities. Namely, in our example, there are 12 utilities. There are 4 attributes at 3 levels. I need to come up with values for these 12 utilities in such a way that so that those utilities are as closely as consistent possible, as consistent with the paired comparisons. So so for each paired comparison the respondent makes, we have an inequality. So there are lots of such inequalities, and you want to find a solution which is most consistent with it. Of course, there may not be any solution which is consistent to all of them, which is often the case because people are not always consistent. So you have to define a poorness of fit associated with this. So if you violate the paired comparison, there is a penalty. So this is almost like machine learning models, actually. There is some similarity to this. So this method, what it does is that it adds a what is called a surplus variable or something in addition to the utility functions. And so and minimizes the sum of those things.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the inequalities is basically what goes into the thing, but then you find out if you are not able to satisfy how much you have missed the paired comparison by, and then you minimize the sum of those things. And I have a research, there are 2 research papers we published. This is based on the work that I did with Alan Shocker. And so these are both published in Psychometrica. And I'm getting, by the way, this presentation itself is going to be available with Dr. Vivek Natarajan. So he will be able to circulate it to you. And if you want any one of my particular research papers, I will be more than happy to send them to you later on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Vivek, you have a comment?
Actually,
Amitabh, you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, this was something that I started. I mean, we know about 2 stages least squares and all, where you model one and so similarly, has there been any 2-stage conjoint analysis? Because this came about from the example you were talking.
Yeah.
We have this equipment company that you were talking about, and they are marketing to physicians, and
Yeah.
physicians are now marketing to patients. So,
Right.
so I was thinking, can there be something like 2-stage conjoint? Has people done it, or is it possible theoretically?
Yeah. So there is a 2-stage conjoint, but it doesn't address the problem that you just said. So let me first answer your question, and then I will tell you what 2-stage conjoint is, which is a little bit different. So it is, of course, it is entirely possible that you can do 2 other type of conjoints in this problem. One, how does a patient decide whether to go to take the lab here or go to outside lab? Right? I mean, they can say, doctor, I would rather, I don't have the time or whatever. They can give some excuse. I will go to the lab and give the blood test and you will get the result. Maybe they don't trust this doctor's office lab as much as an outside lab. That may be possible. Okay. So you can analyze that problem itself also by a conjoint. Well, because price may be a factor for the patient, because instead of paying what the thing charges, I may be able to get it at a cheaper rate in another location. Similarly, as the earlier question somebody asked corresponds to, you can also do a conjoint on the manufacturer side, as you were saying, that I have different ways of making this machine. They have implications in terms of R&D, the number of years it takes for me to actually come to market with, et cetera, et cetera. And would I rather do this or that? That's also a conjoint problem. In fact, many problems in the real world are conjoint problems, because we often choose, when you decide to buy one home compared to the other home, that's a conjoint problem. This house is really good with respect to its garden and all of this thing, but inside it's not so good. Whereas this other location is better, but it is costly a lot more. So all of that is it's a conjoint problem. Now, there is something called 2-stage conjoint, but that is something else actually. That is, it says, you sort of think of sort of higher level attributes. So for example, you can think of, and then lower level attributes. So that is what is called a 2-stage conjoint. But going to the particular question you asked, this may be the better way to think about it. Other questions?
Very good. Anybody else has any questions?
Is there software for this?
Yeah. So currently there in the reference I give at the very end, there is I have a, let me see here. I have a reference at the very end of this presentation. Sorry about that. at the very end, there is a company called Sawtooth Software, and that company has software available for doing this thing really, and that is what they are probably the leaders in this field. I don't have any financial connection with them. They have, this field has advanced, of course, as you might imagine. We did some of this research back in 1968. There is something called the multinomial logit problem and model, and that is used in some of the software. There is something called hierarchical Bayes estimation in statistics that goes into this software. So there is software available for these things. You can lease from them. Yes, Sawtooth Software.
So Srinivasan, since this was started in applied discipline in marketing,
yeah,
was there any influence on this? Was it picked up by other disciplines which are more traditional, like economics or econometrics? Did they pick this up to answer some of their research questions?
Yeah, great question. So it turns out in medicine it is used a lot actually. So I think I know a lot of researchers in healthcare who sort of go through this whole thing. For example, I'll give you an extreme example of this. There is a company which is trying to sort of say, let's say that you have a prostate cancer, for example. There are multiple treatments that you can have for prostate cancer. And some of those side effects of these treatments are very bad. And so would you rather have this treatment or that treatment? How can I have the customer input into that process? So like that, there is a large number of research that goes on in research that goes on in pharmaceutical field, as well as generally healthcare. I would say is a field where I think the number of applications can be at least as much as what's happening in marketing itself. Now, there is also in economics, as you correctly pointed out, this is clearly related to the work on what is called discrete choice, and there is a economist by name McFadden, Daniel McFadden, who won the Nobel Prize in economics back maybe some 15 years ago or so, and he developed something called the multinomial logit model, and that multinomial logit model is used in this. Typically, economists, when they study this problem, they study it at the aggregate level, not at the individual consumer level. And so it is not as useful for marketing, but for their purposes, which is often in a antitrust context, for example, or something like that, then the aggregate model may be sufficient. So they use something like conjoint, but it is done at the aggregate level. So this is the multinomial kind of discrete choice models that McFadden and others have used.
So essentially, this model is useful in any kind of multi-attribute decision-making situation.
Absolutely. So I'll give you an extreme example. I'll give an extreme example of this, which is, I think you will find this interesting. This happened many years ago, about 10 years ago. My second son got his PhD at that time from Harvard, and he had two postdoctoral opportunities, one in the Netherlands and one in San Diego. And the Netherlands opportunity had a number of advantages. That is, he will learn something completely different from what he had learned earlier. And it will also be an opportunity for him to go out to the United States and see what the rest of the world is like. And on the other hand, the San Diego opportunity is better from a weather point of view. And also, there was a mentor who was really ideal for him because he knew his kind of work, etc. So he was thinking, and he was going on for a month figuring out whether he should go here or there. And at some point, he told me, Dad, I'm just not able to make up this decision, really. It's just, there's just so much pulling me in this direction and other pulling in this direction. So I said, okay, let's do this following study. You tell me what are all the things that matter to you. And I will not, as a dad, I will not influence their decision, but you just tell me what are all the things that matter to you. And we will just go find out how important each of these attributes are for you through this technique. And then you can then basically put them together and say, what is the total utility for the Netherlands option and what is the total utility for the San Diego option? And as you might imagine, the total utility for the two are not that different, but San Diego has a little bit of an advantage. But more importantly, it also became clear which attribute was most important for him. And if this mentor is not going to be there in San Diego, then this whole idea of going to San Diego is a bad idea. So it gave him an opportunity to think about that and ask this professor, hey, are you going to be at least there for another next 3 years or so? So that when I do my postdoc, in the middle of that, you don't go somewhere else, and then I am kind of left in the hanging, so to speak. So, so this is applicable everywhere, actually. And in fact, I know of a company, let's say not a company, but a small two practitioners who use this for career counseling for people.
So your son went to San Diego, or did he go to Netherlands?
He went to San Diego. He finished his 2-year postdoc at San Diego. He is now at the University of California, Berkeley, as a associate professor with tenure. He will hopefully get promoted to full next year in psychology and cognitive science.
Very good.
Excellent.